Hey there, poetry freaks. Welcome to Poetry Freaks, the podcast. Episode 7, we'll be talking about cursed poet Dino Campana. And he was an Italian visionary poet from 1885. He was born, died in 1932. I'm going to be referencing lines from Brief Lives of Idiots by Ermanno Cavazzoni, and it's translated by Jamie Richards. It's a really cool book. I got it from a bookstore in Chicago last year. Don't remember which one. The book is a parody of the lives of the saints, and it's filled with, quote, idiots drawn from real life. Now, Dino Campana is not the idiot in the segment of the book, but there is a student who sort of fakes his way through exams by being from the same town as Dino Campana, which I will talk about later. And Dino Campana was a poet maudit, a cursed poet, perhaps the cursed poet. But first, before we launch in, we've got our Dream Whip box. We're going to pull the next line in the String of Pearls poem that we're assembling all summer. Song, nervous children are always with us. All right, that's it. Nervous children are always with us. Ain't it true? I'm going to read the poem prompted by the last episode where I did a reading from Disembodied Poems for Wandering Ghosts, made moods from the first lines / titles in the table of contents, and chose some words. And so the prompt ended up being, do I merit my licorice, by way of the word bread. Oh, it was the beautiful words were from John McClure's assembling of a universe deck of 100 cards that are yours, that you selected. Go see that last episode if you didn't and talk more about that. Do I merit my licorice by way of bread? Licorice merited, as I have boiled the eggs and sung to the flowers, the bees, to my sister's cat, and my parents in their graves. The song is sung and the laundry hung, the cookies baked and the licorice achieved. And yet, who's got the bread for lashings of licorice in such a malevolent economy as this? Thank you. I have foregone, I think, the last couple episodes, the whole reading of an older poem I wrote, because last time I really got you with a whole bunch of poetry from that book, that reading. So we'll skip that for today and go ahead and roll the dice. I've assembled some poetic moods that are Campana related. Dino Campana's little phrases from his poems, and same for the poetic words. Sometimes phrases instead of just one word, because he put words together so nicely. All right, whiskey glass, 10-sided die, poetic mood, Campana style, and we get the number 4. Smoky summer evening is the mood, and the word is number 9, 2 words, rotting smell. Hey, if you would like to do your own Campana mood and words without using that prompt, I'll just read them now. 1 through 10, the moods, necessity's ghost, seaweed in your hair, how light the world is in your hands, smoky summer evening, who lit the lamp, a last goodbye, spectral garden, silenced laurel, screams to the dying sun, and song of darkness. All right, you might have to wind that back to get them all down. And the words, 1 through 10, languishing, garden, the night, acrobat, a wind odor, tanned skin, something untouchable, ineluctable, which means inescapable. I had to look it up. Rotting smell, and mother of pearl. This is to give you a little flavor of Dino Campana's use of words. I could only find 3 poems online that were translated into English. There is an entire English translation available on Amazon, also on City Lights Books, and I have not purchased it. I'm about to. Too little too late for this episode, but I do like to keep these briefer when I can, although I can ramble, the Lord knows. Okay, let's talk about Campana's poetry. Campana's poetry is a new poetry in which sounds, colors, and music are blended in a powerful vision. The line is undefined, an expressive articulation of monotony, but at the same time full of dramatic images of annihilation and purity. The title of Campana's only published work alludes to the Orphic hymns, a literary genre developed in ancient Greece between the 2nd and 3rd century AD and characterized by a non-classical theogony. Also, prayers to the gods, especially the god Phanes, and characterized by spells to prevent evil and misfortune. That's from Wikipedia. Here is an example, which I found at allpoetry.com. The stained glass window. So it's an English translation. The smoky summer evening, from the high glass window it sheds light into the shadows, and it leaves a burning seal in my heart. But who has? A lamp lights up on the terrace over the river. Who has? At the Madonna Nina del Ponte, who lit the lamp? There's a rotting smell in the room. It's there, in the room, a languishing red sore. The stars are mother of pearl buttons, and in the evening she dresses in velvet. And the fatuous evening trembles. The evening is fatuous and it flickers, but it is there. In the middle of the evening there is always a languishing red sore. Poet Modi. The Poet Dino Campana is the title of this segment in Brief Lives of Idiots. It's on page 129. It's the one that gave me the idea for this whole thing. And it's not so much about Dino Campana as about a university student named Meligari who comes from the same town as Campana, the town of Maradi in Italy. This student fakes his way through every oral exam, right through his thesis, and he bought his written thesis already written from another student who was known for selling theses to other students. In fact, was bullied into it. Meligari's strategy for faking his way through exams was to mention that he was from Maradi. This inevitably caused the professor to perk up. Oh, the poet Dino Campana is also from Maradi. And so the professor at that point would only want to talk about Maradi, kind of forget that there was an oral exam going on. It worked every time, whether the exam was for literature or geography or anything else. So the idiot in the scenario of Brief Lives of Idiots is Meligari, the student. Meligari learned as he went. In his experience, female professors always wanted to talk about Dino Campana's relationship with the poet Sibilla Aleramo. Is that right? Good. Sibilla Aleramo. If the female professor was married, she would go on and on about the intense love affair the two poets shared. If unmarried, she would mention that Sibilla Aleramo's real name was Rina Faccio. This was meant to be dismissive, sort of slag her off. Every professor was enchanted by the fact that Dino Campana was a misanthrope, always kept to himself in a corner in cafes. In fact, Campana was considered a poet maudit, a cursed poet. See episode 87 of Podcast in A Minor, titled Vaguely Cursed, if you want to know more. Though Campana's curse was hardly vague. From Wikipedia on the curse of our friend Dino Campana. Between May and July 1906, Campana made a first trip to Switzerland and France, which ended with his arrest in Bardonecchia and his admission to the mental asylum in Imola. In 1907, not knowing what to do about their son's madness, Campana's parents sent him to stay in Latin America with a family of Italian immigrants. This was not exactly an autonomous journey for the poet, who would not have been able to obtain a passport for the New World by himself, since he was a known madman. And in fact, his family had to apply for his passport and organize the trip. Campana left out of fear of being sent back to the asylum. Campana's parents also supported the move to send him to America in the hope that it would help him recover, but it seems that the passport was valid only for arrival, likely an attempt to get rid of him, since living with Campana had become unbearable at that point. It seems that his mother had come to believe that her son was the Antichrist. Cursed, not vaguely. After reading the poet Dino Campana in Brief Lives of Idiots, I immediately looked him up, and Sibilla Aleramo, because it did say these were based on actual idiots, so to speak, but I just wanted to confirm their existence. I had not heard of them, or I thought I'd never heard of them, but Wikipedia showed in the changed color of the ink on a link that I had in fact read about Campana in research for Vaguely Cursed, and I remember doing so after looking at it again and becoming overwhelmed with his terrible plight, and I changed course at that point. I don't remember how. It's been some episodes ago. Not that many episodes ago, but a long time ago. A lot of water under the bridge and such. Got married, was working. Now that we have some idea of Campana's troubles, the rest of our exploration will compare lines from Brief Lives of the Idiots, the segment titled The Poet Dino Campana, and we'll compare that with the accepted facts. All right, the first line from the book. After this, the professor would present a few anecdotes about Dino Campana, usually how he lost the manuscript of Canti Orfici, his travels on foot, or the fact that Campana wasn't studied enough in school. Now, I don't know how much they study Campana in school, so I'm not going to address that. Here we'll address his travels on foot, and we'll get later on to Canti Orfici. And this is from Poet Biographies, Dino Campana, at greeninteger.com. Back in Maradi, and this is after sailing to South America and stowing away on a freighter to get home because he didn't have enough money to sail legit. He continued his hobo-like life, hiking through various mountain passes before he finally returned to the university at Bologna and then the Institute in Florence, where he received his degree in poetry. So, confirmation, he hiked through various mountain passes. Number 2, the line from Brief Lives of the Idiots. At that, the professor would get excited and say that Campana was a misanthropic poet, quite unapproachable. In general, he avoided people, even at the Café delle Giube Rosse in Florence, where both the futurists and the Vossiani poets liked to go. He, on the contrary, kept to himself in the corner. Observing the book in a Florence bookstore, Soffici, a distant relative of Campana's, whom Campana trusted to deliver his poems to a publisher years earlier, and Soffici never did, Soffici bought a copy and read it, impressed by its deep and dark images. He sent a letter of praise to Campana, who also had received a review by the poet critic Emilio Cicci. These events led Campana to return to Florence, where he remained on the outside of the literary circles, selling copies of the book to survive. Whenever anyone would doubt the value of his book, Campana would bring out the letter from Soffici and the review from Cicci, reading it out loud. Journalists, observing his grandiose and often absurd behavior, began rumors of his madness. And that also is from greeninteger.com. So there we have him remaining outside of the literary circles and reading his good reviews to those who would doubt. So he was off in a corner by himself. Number 3, the female teachers like to say that Campana looked like a bum, and despite this, Sibylla Alaramo loved him passionately. Campana had an irrepressible desire to escape and dedicate himself to a life of vagrancy, which he accomplished by undertaking various jobs. The first reaction of his family, his town, and the public authorities was to consider Campana's strange behavior and travels to foreign countries as an obvious sign of madness. He was judged with suspicion, both because his physical traits were considered too German and due to the vigorous way he discussed poetry and philosophy. Following his journeys, the police, in agreement with the psychiatric practices of the time and the uncertainty of his family, admitted him to a lunatic asylum at the age of 21. Now, hey, he was dedicated to a life of vagrancy, so we'll call that maybe he did look like a bum. Inconclusive, but possible. We'll get to his relationship with Sibylla Alaramo in a moment. Number 4, Dino Campana seemed like a poet even when he was young, as early as middle school, when everyone threw rocks at him. So this is from the City Lights book's description of Canti Orfici. Dino Campana wrote the unique visionary masterwork of Italian literature, Orphic songs, when he was in his 20s. The originality, rapturous language, and strange beauty of his poetry make him as important to 20th century poetry as Garcilaso. Oh my gosh. Oh, I didn't pre-read this. I'm having enough trouble with the Italian, for which I apologize. But this looks like it may have it has like a semicolon in the middle of the word. So anyway, he's important to 20th century poetry, like Lorca and Mayakovsky, which are easier to pronounce than Garcilaso, something like that with a semicolon. Campana was the wild man of Italian poetry in 1914 on the eve of World War I. The war saved some young Italians from rebellion and from fascism, but not Campana. Always an outsider, in bold, because that was our question. He was a vagabond who worked now and then as a gaucho, miner, fireman, organ grinder, janitor, circus tumbler, horse groomer, and a wandering musician with a gypsy band. He died in Castelpulci, a psychiatric hospital, in 1932. And from Oberlin College Press, Dino Campana's small and intensely magical body of poetry from the early years of the last century, prose and free verse that combine the visual and the visionary with astonishing vigor and haunting grace, is little known to English-speaking readers. Oberlin College Press. Now, I want it so much. Dino Campana, 1885 to 1932, was an Italian lyricist and poet known for his flamboyant personality. His only collection of poems is found in Orphic Songs, the English translation of the title. In 1918, he was admitted into a mental hospital and lived the rest of his life there. Varying accounts on that. It looks like he was kind of in and out of them as he traveled, as he published his work and things like that, from what I read in Wikipedia. Now then, the question there had been, hey, was he a weirdo poet even in middle school when people threw rocks at him? Well, always an outsider is what is bolded from all that, but I did love all of those descriptions. And, that is to say, that was kind of a humorous line in the book anyway. It wasn't supposed to be, like, not even the professors were spouting that. It was our friend, whose name I forget, the student whose name is Meligari. He was the one who said that, oh, my great uncle knew him, and he was like a poet even in middle school, and everybody threw rocks at him. And this was something, speaking of middle school, that he would say, Meligari, is that his name? I just keep forgetting his name, because it's not a name that is like right in my wheelhouse. So apologies if that's offensive. I just never heard that name before this. This was written by an Italian writer and then translated. So everything, yeah, Meligari would say that. He would sometimes be called upon to substitute teach in middle school. So he would have it for like a week at a time. So during the week, he would just obsess over Dino Campana and about how he was from the same town, make them read the little 10-sentence biography in their textbooks, and then close their books, ask what town he was from, and if they got it wrong, they had to go home and write the biography, write their own original biography of Campana. And one of the things he would tell them was, my great uncle knew him, and he was bizarre like a poet, even in middle school, and others would throw rocks at him. So, but always an outsider. That is our answer. So I don't know if they threw rocks, but that was kind of a funny one anyway. Number 5, as an adult, he had a very thick mustache. It was his distinguishing characteristic, as well as his hair, as the photographs attest. Yes, the photographs do attest to this. Confirmed, dark, swooping mustache, like two, little letter U's. Shiny, parted hair, dreamy, heavy eyelids, which are not mentioned in the Wikipedia or Brief Lives of Idiots. Opinion. So number 6, the line from the book. Like, for example, that all his poems had been lost because of the futurists, he told the class, but he rewrote all of them verbatim. Did he rewrite all of his poems verbatim? Canti Orfici to the Spectral Garden. Here's a sample from that. I was only, like I said, able to find 3 poems translated into English that were available just on the internet easily without buying the book. And this is to the spectral garden, to the silenced laurel, with green garlands, to autumnal earth, alas, goodbye, on the harsh, barren, reddened hillsides in the waning sun, life in the distance, its raucous cries merged, screams to the dying sun, that stains the flower beds with blood. Yes, colorful, as mentioned, riotous, wild. All right. Okay, so Campana's original version of Orphic Songs contained poems he'd written between 1906 and 1913. He gave the manuscript to his distant relative, Ardengo Soffici, and another associate of La Serba magazine, whose name was Giovanni Papini, to deliver for publication. It was Campana's only copy, and when he followed up later, nobody claimed to have it. This nearly sent Campana over the edge. First, he begged, then threatened to confront Soffici with a knife. And he was a little shaky. He was on emotionally shaky ground anyway, it sounds like, most of his life. A tortured poet, a cursed poet, if you will. So from Wikipedia, in the winter of 1914, convinced he could no longer recover the manuscript, Campana decided to rewrite everything, relying on memory and his sketches. In a few days, working at night, and at the cost of huge mental effort, he managed to rewrite the poetry, albeit with modifications and additions. In the spring of 1914, with the help of a local printer of religious tracts, Campana was finally able to self-publish the collection Orphic Songs at his own expense, the title a reference to the mythic figure of Orpheus, the first of poet-musicians. The first edition constituted around 500 copies, originally meant to be 1,000. 44 copies were sold on subscription, and Campana attempted with marginal success to sell the remainder of his portion of the run. The printer had taken half the books as partial printing payment, and Campana was sort of trying to sell them at cafes in Florence with marginal success. The original manuscript, the lost manuscript, was found amongst Soffici's belongings in 1971. This find demonstrated that not only had Campana rewritten the original text almost perfectly, but had also nearly doubled it in size. This has led some to suggest that Campana had another copy of the manuscript from which he reconstructed the work. I don't know. He seemed pretty upset, so I'm thinking no. But maybe he did rewrite. Maybe he did rewrite them verbatim, Beautiful Mind style, also adding more brilliance to it as he went. Or maybe not, but then this statement was, oh no, that was the other one. Was that? Yeah, that was another one that was a colorful statement while substitute teaching at middle schools, saying, hey, he rewrote it verbatim. And finally, number 7, the line number 7 chosen from Brief Lives of Idiots, the section, the poet Dino Campana. Unlike the other professor who had mentioned the couple's tempestuous love, and that is in relation to Sibilla Alaramo. Campana met Sibilla Alaramo, the author of the novel Una Donna, and began an intense and tumultuous relationship with her that she ended at the start of 1917 after a brief encounter at Christmas 1916 in Maradi. Their letters and correspondence, published by Feltrinelli in 2000, are testimony of the relationship between Campana and Alaramo. This correspondence begins with a letter from Alaramo dated June 10th, 1916, where the author expresses her admiration for Canti Orfici, declaring the poems to have enchanted and bedazzled her. Ooh. So she dug him. To sum up, Campana's bio from the Brooklyn Rail. Ending our 7 questions, our 7 lines from the book, we sum up the prime Italian example of a poet maudit. Campana battled mental health problems from an early age and spent a great deal of his youth in and out of lunatic asylums and traveling across Europe. An autodidact, he taught himself several languages and became part of the thriving literary scene in Florence. Autodidact just means self-taught. He composed the poems for Canti Orfici sometime between 1906 and 1913, and self-published them in 1914 after rewriting them. Shortly after, Campana began a notorious and tumultuous love affair with Sibilla Alaramo, the author of Una Donna. In 1918, Campana was admitted to a psychiatric hospital near Florence, where he remained until his death in 1932. Okay, second confirmation. There we go. His remains were given a proper burial in 1946 in a ceremony attended by many Italian intellectuals, including Eugenio Montale and Carlo Bo. Also, Wikipedia notes that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia toward the end of his life, and that he may have died from sepsis due to a barbed wire injury in an attempt to escape the psychiatric hospital in Castel Pozzi. And that is the cursed poet life of the poet Dino Campana. And thank you for your patience with my pronunciations and my, what was this? What was that? All that stuff? Because I had this idea last night and kind of just wrote it all up, and now it's done. I just was kind of dying to get it out there. So I really appreciate you listening. Right along, it's the Smoky Summer Night by way of, I can't remember the word. I always try, and then I have to scroll back up and look again until my mind is triggered. I know it was word number 9. Too many pages, so much. Okay, Smoky Summer Evening by way of Rotting Smell. Was it Rotting Smell? It was, I think it was. Rotting Smell. Let's do it. Okay, so write some poetry. Thank you for bearing with. I love the story of a cursed poet. I don't mean to take, joy and entertainment from their difficulties, but I don't know. It kind of makes me feel, well, I won't say, because I don't really know. I don't know what it makes me feel. It's fascinating. That's all. Fascinating, Captain. All right. however illogical. So, okay, very cool. Brief Lives of Idiots. Something to check out. Link in show notes. I hope you'll look for Disembodied, Poems for Wandering Ghosts by me, and Poetry Freaks by myself and Pete Kelly. Amy Zollers, McAnally, and Pete Kelly. So, more on that later. Catch you later, Poetry Freaks. Grab your poetry hat, let's go. Grab your poetry hat, let's go.